Right.
Well, good evening, councillors and Mr. Coles. We'll crack on with the meeting because there's actually quite a bit in this agenda, one way or another. Starting off with apologies for absence. I note
Councillor Fuller and Davis, yeah.
do we accept those apologies?
Yep.
Yeah. Right. We'll move. But it says representation of interested parties, none, but I can see that it is. That's what we'll do, is we'll get rid of the declaration of minutes.
Yeah,
Then we'll hear from Mr. Coles. Then we'll deal with the application he's interested in. We've taken it slightly out of order. And we'll crack on with the rest of it. So, any declarations of interest? First of all, any disclosable peculiar interest? Oh, other interests.
There's one, I'm trying to find it now, one of the properties that is on the agenda. I know the owners.
That's the first one, 75 West Street.
75 West Street, I know the owners of that. I should probably say that from the outset.
Yeah, right. And if that's the only one, we'll move on to the minutes of the meeting, which was held on the 7th of March. Sadly, I couldn't attend, but present were councillors Arnold, Fuller, Jones and Shearer. Now, the minutes of that meeting have been circulated. Anybody who was there care to propose them?
Yeah,
Councillor Arnold, somebody to second. Councillor Shearer, all those in favour?
we'd still be in favour if we weren't there.
I suppose we can.
Oh, it's last and all that. It's very
Right.
confusing.
Notice I missed out on what was probably the shortest meeting of the year there. 30 minutes. See what you get up to, I'm not around. 1, 4, 3. Right. In that case, Mr. Coles, the floor is yours. I don't know whether you want to come to this side of the table so we can see.
yeah. Right, the plans originally went in for a single-storey ground floor extension next to my house, bungalow. And I thought, well, fair enough. If I don't like it, I'll put a 6-foot fence panel up, and that's the end of it. But when they started building, it's pretty clear that they weren't building as to the plans. First thing I noticed was when
Sorry. I'm just trying to find the ground line. That's the one you were.
well, no, the first one, the first plan.
Hang on. I have it up here somewhere.
You had them all up there.
There.
That was the one that was granted. This was plans that were granted, and the condition was number 2, condition that they should all, the building should conform to these plans. When they started building, I noticed that this wasn't right. It's actually 7.5 foot from the floor. So what they haven't shown is the slope. I think if Lisa brings that tab over, these are the ones they've put in now. These are the plans now. So they're now showing a slope, which wasn't in the granted plans. So all of a sudden, the house is on a slope, which it wasn't before. And if you go to the next slidey one, this is their new plans, and this one is the actual ground line. So even now, it's not being drawn to scale. I've got some pictures. I think you've all got them, at least probably. But this is the view from my daughter's bedroom. So we've got the window now peering in. Those are the 2 windows that go in here, straight into my daughter's bedroom. This was another one to show that was the ground level on the granted plans. We give them a height of 4 metres. We've actually managed to build up that number of bricks and give it a height of 5.2. So it's completely does not represent the plans that were granted. What else have we got, Lisa?
You've looked at that one, haven't you?
Looked at that one, looked at that one, looked at that one.
Have we seen these bits?
Yeah,
These the new
we've seen
ones?
those.
What were the new bits? They were the ones you sent
It's
just now.
the one,
weren't they?
the attachments were,
Right, that's another one, so you can see the window there.
that's actually sitting up in my daughter's bedroom now. So there's a window coming straight in. I took that today. Just sitting up in the bed as if you're just getting out of bed. If you go to that one, Lisa, that's it, and some of the attachments. No, that's that one. Where's the one I sent you earlier?
That's this one.
Right, some of these. That's the, this is my front garden. This is where I sit with my barbecue in the summer. That's just suddenly appeared. There's the line. These bricks are meant to be in keeping with the previous bricks, which they're not. And that's the height now. And I did send a mock, what you could call, well, there's another one there. Yeah,
There's your mock one.
this
isn't
one,
it?
what mock one. They're proposing to put, I know, okay, cut and paste, Photoshop. But
I thought it was
that's a 6 foot fence panel. Now they're proposing to put a patio, raised patio, 1.35 metres, which is 4.5 foot, next to my garden. Now, if you get a 6 foot man and you put a 6 foot panel in front of him, he chops him off just below the knees. So it's like having a bloke with his head 10.5 feet in the air, peering straight in your garden, if you can imagine it. So the whole that's today, they've just put the doors in today. They were advised to stop planning, to stop development, but they didn't. Basically that's it. I could go on, there's documentation to back it up. I complained on the October. Yeah, again, look, you see there's that. And I think if you do the west elevation, Lisa. Yeah, so again from the window, there's the brickwork coming in. It just clearly didn't show that line. There we are. That's the line of the plan. And that's what they built. Well, there's a letter I sent to, have you got my original letter that I sent to? That one.
The top one, very top.
Four step door. Yeah, so I'm pointing out there that the site plan shows that topography is being flat and level, where is a significant reduction in ground level towards the front of the site. I provide an overlay to show this. Come down. And it's saying about the brickwork. Basically, the works are therefore not strictly in accordance with the submitted drawings, which is the requirements that are granted on. So, of course you can ask your question, anybody can.
Is it a dormer bungalow, or what is this house?
It's a bungalow, it's where,
It is a bungalow.
it's where a net
I mean, it looks as if there could almost be a basement under the extra.
They've come out, I think they did,
terraces.
the original plans, you questioned it quite heavily. And then when they went in, there was a door on the side,
Yeah.
and my next door neighbour, Anthony, the barrister guy, he pointed out that the door was actually 2 foot off the floor when you come out. So you step out of the door and there's a 2 foot
There's
void.
something funny going on.
So, yeah, I don't understand how they got away with putting that drawing in, it being accepted. It was under the cover of COVID, you know, so it was at the time when people were probably not putting as many site visits in as they could have done. That's it, basically.
So apart from your, and I totally understand, disquiet about the fact they're not following their own plans,
Yeah,
what would your main objection be? The fact that you're overlooked, or?
well, it's completely overlooked. As I say, the patio,
I'm
raised
talking about
patio,
from your point of view.
from my point of
Yeah.
view, it's, yeah, I'm completely overlooked. The privacy of my 20-year-old daughter, she's got 3 windows now looking into her bedroom. We've got a raised decking, which putting people with 6
Looking
foot
down.
looking down,
Yeah.
down onto my garden where I was sitting and have that's where I was in the summer, where I was sitting with Dad and that barbecue. Yeah, it just, as soon as I saw it, I thought, hang on, that's not right. And the builders even said, do you know what? We thought that wasn't right. And they were asked to stop building, and then we just carried on.
Can I just clarify, which number Stoke Law Road then are you?
I 10.
Number 10.
I mean, these plans, like this one that's in tonight, I never even got notified of it. So I put in a complaint query, whatever you want to call it, in October to Northampton Council. And then another planning variation goes in, and no one even told me. I just stumbled over it on the internet.
So no notices
No,
put up.
no, nothing to me,
Well,
nothing, not
There
personally.
should be public notices.
Well, there's one outside on the opposite side of the road, which appeared a few days later. But I actually never received any. Which is quite
Yes,
strange,
it
isn't it?
should, which it should be done.
So, yeah, all in all, not
So
that,
they're
that's it.
also perhaps taking advantage of the slightly chaotic situation in planning.
I think they were,
Well, they're supposed to notify all the immediate neighbours personally, it's not just supposed to go on the street furniture, it's supposed to go
I
to
never-
all
I
of the
never-
immediate
Yeah.
neighbours in a personal letter.
I've not got anything
Mm.
That's what, yes, I mean, yes. it's-
for this, not got anything. You can see that's where it is. That's the bungalow here.
This one, yeah.
What was the name of it?
I can't see it, you're coming in the way. Right, thank you.
Annette lived there and she sold that off and
Right.
and then she ended up poorly. So the bungalow got sold a few years ago. But as I say, they're just carrying on with development, it's just ignoring the planning. And I wrote the planning, and we've got all the letters. I wrote to planning and said they're still doing it, and he said, they were advised,
Amazing.
but they just ignored it, so they just carried on building anyway.
Right, well, thank
That's
you.
it.
Thank you for that. Because as I said, if we get any questions as we
Yeah.
discuss it, obviously we'll ask you.
I better not take your phone.
Right, well, we'll take the application for Stoke Law Road ahead of the one for 75 West Street. It's probably fair to say that at the time that I prepared my report, obviously I was unaware of this background, hence the fact that it's about 4 lines long. Because all I did was to make this point. The application relates to a condition attached to the planning permission NE 21-0050-5814 and refers to a new drawing 1351-02D, replacing 1351-020. I pointed out the plan on the portal is 1351-02E. So it's not the same plan on the face of it as is referred to in the application. And I just said that seems to suggest an error on the application. Then I said OTC hadn't objected to the original application, which we hadn't. And I said that there weren't any comments on the portal, which there weren't when I looked at it. Now, this raises all sorts of issues. It's an application, in effect, to vary a condition, which, as Mr. Collins has told us, is a condition that says it will be built in accordance with Plan A. He now wants to do it for Plan B. The letters are not strictly accurate, given what I said earlier. And our normal process would probably have been to start on the basis of saying, well, we didn't object originally, so presumably we would be consistent and we wouldn't have any objection to what's proposed. However, we do have a provision that says that if we get more information about an application and we think we should review a decision, we can review a decision. I suspect that if the information that was now before us had been before us at the time that we were looking at this originally, we might have well responded differently. So it seems to me that it's appropriate that we do look at it again. Having said that, it's not an application for planning permission. It's an application in relation to an extant planning permission. And of course, in some respects, it may be that our concern is, well, should planning permission be granted at all? But I think that ship has probably sailed, sadly. Because all we can actually look at is what do we say in relation to the specific application? Can I substitute drawing X for drawing Y? Now, I suppose what we can say is that it's now apparent to us that neither the original plan nor the one now shown on the portal, which doesn't seem to tally in numbering with what is referred to on the application, and I can't see any copy of the plan with the number that is referred to on the application, but that it's not, it doesn't appear to be correct. It presents a very misleading position, and consequently, we would not want permission to be given to vary that. But just think where it takes us. That means it takes us back to the original permission, based on the original drawing, which it appears is plainly wrong. I have to say at this point, I start to struggle in terms of what can the planning department do faced with this rather unusual set of facts.
No, I don't think you take it on again.
I don't know that they can.
Yeah, they can.
And in as much as it has planning permission to be built according to a plan. Now, if of course, I'm almost thinking aloud here, if it isn't possible to build it to the plan because the plan is actually so inaccurate, then you would have to vary it. And if you have to vary it, you'd have to substitute a proper plan, and it would appear that the plan that we've got now may still not be a proper plan. So we could argue that it should be built according to a new proper plan, but then could it be built? And that's the point at which I have to say I struggle. Now, what we clearly are likely to want to do is to say to the planners, this is a shambles. Had we been sitting at this, looking at it de novo, we'd have very clearly had concerns about the apparent overlooking of a property with windows that appear to look straight into an adjoining property, which is usually dealt with either by saying, well, you can't put windows on that side, or if you have got windows, they've got to be obscured glass. It doesn't necessarily stop the building, it just stops having windows that you can see through. But you've also got the patio issue, with a rather striking photo fit picture showing potential practical effect. Now, the neighbour would need planning permission to erect a fence that is more than the metric equivalent of 6 feet high. And on the face of it, you'd have to erect an extraordinary high fence in order to avoid the overlooking that he points out. And I think that we could make the point similarly that under no circumstances would we consider that satisfactory, if that be the view of us all. And what we could probably do is highlight what our concerns are and invite NNC to use whatever powers they have to try to address the situation that in part perhaps they have created by not perhaps challenging the original drawings in a way that it now appears they probably should have been. So that was my thought. I don't know how other people view it.
I agree with all of that, David. It is a bit of a Gordian knot, isn't it? I think all I would add to your very good summary is to stress the fact that what has been built deviates from what was agreed. You know, it's just, I know it was implied in what you said, but I think I would just stress that rather more strongly, David.
Yeah. Does anybody have any other views, contributions or otherwise?
I wonder whether you could have actually put the original structure, built it anyway. because it's going from 2 courses of bricks to 18 to make up for the fact that
The
there's a
drawings
slope.
is all wrong. Yeah.
You couldn't put that the original drawing
Well, I think
with 2
that's,
courses
I think
of
that was
bricks
the sort of
on the piece of land.
point that I was saying.
Yeah,
If you reject this plan, you have to go back to the original plan, but you can't go back to the original plan because you can't build it in accordance with the original
Exactly.
plan because it's wrong.
Yeah.
Therefore, there has to be a third plan
plan.
that would have to be looked at. Now, raises an interesting scenario. If it were impossible to produce a third plan that would meet the concerns that we have, and assume for the moment that those concerns will be shared by NNC, you have the rather fantastical position that you have a grant of planning permission that you simply can't
Building.
actually do, because if you try to build it in accordance with the planning permission, you might face enforcement action.
Well,
And
I
I-
think where they could do it is
I've been
actually.
doing this
take
a very long
the
time.
ground out.
Have it split level.
They'd actually, well, they'd have to actually effectively eradicate the slope, if you see what I mean, by taking the ground out.
Oh, sloping house.
Um,
Now you get up north.
but I've certainly
Yeah,
never
you
done
have a
this way. We're not happy. I think I could summarise it in that way. I will endeavour to put some, I can see Lisa breathing a huge sigh of relief. I will endeavour to draft something that I think hopefully captures the feeling of the meeting in relation to that. And no doubt you can advise Mr. Coles of our response when we actually see it, but you will have a fair idea from what's been said in front of you this evening as to where this is going in terms of what will actually emerge from this council.
Just one, I think just so we're sort of blocking off a route that they might think of going down. I think we're all, to an extent, varying degrees, sensible enough to realise that plans change sometimes when it comes to the actual building process. But there's changing, and then there's what I've sort of said, a complete other plan almost. Yeah. So it's adapting your plan, and there's the other one.
When you get to the point where what you have to end up with is so radically different to where you start,
Exactly.
there is an issue, and that's what we would say and look at what we were looking at originally, which was that. Right. That's an interesting start to the evening.
Not about that. Shall I let you know?
You're welcome to stay all day.
Thanks for your time, everybody. Thank you very much. Thanks for your help, Lisa.
You're welcome, thank
Yeah,
you.
bye.
Right, 75 West Street. Replacement of single glazed round port sash window with a double glazed heritage sash of the same style. Replacement of a single glazed round port bay window with double glazed, which will be double glazing in keeping with the style of the house. There's some photographs on there, Lisa. Yeah, come out of that. I think they're right at the. Need to come out of that one.
I'll come out of that, sorry.
Yeah.
Which one do you think?
Right down at the bottom somewhere, it
Photos.
says photographs. Just so to start with, we've got an image of this building. Now, that building, if I am not mistaken, used to be Mr. and Mrs. Crick's.
Yeah.
Yes.
In the application, there is a design and access statement which makes reference to the fact that at one time this was a cafe, restaurant, a B&B, a carpet shop, which I have to confess I don't remember.
That was prior to the carpets.
Was it? Maybe there, was it? All right. And at some point, therefore, it was a dwelling, it was converted into commercial premises and subsequently with permission converted back again. So there's a bit of background to the property, and that's what it currently looks like. Sadly, when you look at those pictures that Lisa just put up initially, which are the drawings of the new windows, I find those stunningly difficult to actually envisage in situ. But what can we say? It would appear from the information supporting the application that the current windows essentially are softwood and have deteriorated considerably, to the point where the applicant maintains that the glazing companies approached have said, you can't do anything with what you've got, they need replacing. And the proposal is to replace them, if not entirely like for like, with hardwood windows using the same colouring and to be quote unquote in keeping. Now, it is a listed building and it is in the conservation area. The applicant maintains that the existing windows essentially are not historic and have relatively modern glazing in them. I frankly can't remember the property without the windows that it currently has, although I can't remember when they were, and that was done, and it may have been before whilst I was here, but I don't frankly remember it. That takes me back to 81. So the owner wants to put in these new windows, in effect, purpose-built by what he terms a specialist company, and I've set out all the details on the document. My instinct would be to say that whilst we should put the question, as it were, to the conservation officer, is there anything about the existing windows which would suggest that they should be retained and repaired rather than replaced? And I say that because we recently had that application further down the road, Mr. Backhurst's property,
Yes,
the number of which I've forgotten, where it was an application to replace windows, and that went all the way to appeal, which was lost.
And that
And
was
there
by
was
a
a-
company, wasn't it, that claimed to be experts?
And there was a further application, you may recall, in the marketplace, in relation to, I think it was the windows in the bookshop.
Bookshop, yeah.
Where, and I think it was Historic England, had said, what you really need to be doing is conserving these windows and repairing them rather than replacing them. So our first point, presumably to the conservation officer, is, do those principles apply here? Because if they do, it pushes us in one direction. If he accepts, as I suspect he may, that these are relatively modern windows, then it seems to me that all we're really trying to ensure is that what we end up with is not something that looks out of keeping with the property and out of keeping with its surrounds.
Historically, there was the old China shop also in West Street where there was similar problem.
15 West Street,
Yeah.
which was then the Diagoffs
Yeah.
and saga that went on
Yeah.
for years.
So,
And that window still looks horrible. But
Yeah.
yes. So, what do we think?
I can't comment, I know the owners.
Anybody else got any thoughts over and above those that
well, I
I've
have
expressed?
exactly yours, and we know, don't we, that conservation is the name of the game.
Conservation would be the ideal. If it's adjudged worth conserving, then somebody
Yes.
would actually tell us. But if it isn't, then as I say, it basically needs to be
Can I
done
just ask a
sympathetically.
clarification?
Yes.
You mentioned a house further down where, if I followed what you said, David, the recommendation was to conserve rather than replace.
In practice, conserve rather than replace was Butchell in the marketplace. The number of which unfortunately I can't recall, but I think it's on the same side of the road as this one. And about sort of halfway down, so sort of roughly halfway between this one and the bookshop, probably, maybe a bit further this way. And the problem there was that the owner had replaced the windows, applied for permission retrospectively, and nobody liked what had been done and weren't prepared to sanction it. Quite where that's going to lead at the end of the day seems to me to be seen, because we've got a situation in which ENC should be taking enforcement action. In fact, we might care to make a note, Lisa, to just ask them what they are doing about that particular property. But in terms of this one,
Sorry, the reason I asked is because it just so happens, and I hadn't read the minutes of this meeting, I didn't even know this was coming up. I obviously walk back and forwards past this property and adjoining properties on a regular basis, because I live very close to it. And it just so happens that the house next to it had its windows replaced on Saturday.
Right. I wasn't aware of that.
They did a very quick job.
Do you know-
They were all out when I walked past in the morning to go down to QVH and to do the whatever.
Yeah.
And by the time I walked back again, they put them all the new ones in.
Do you know the number of that?
Was it
77. That's
So that's number 77. Another instruction he said, check number 77. Is it a listed building?
That's what I'm just going to.
It's probably not listed.
I don't know whether it is or not. It certainly would, however, be in the conservation. It's certainly in the conservation area. If it's listed, clearly there should have been an application for this building consent, and equally clearly there wasn't, because I'm sure I would remember it if there had been. So yeah, we'll check that one out. It's a separate issue. What happened there doesn't make this
No.
application better, worse, or anything else. But thanks for that information. It seems to me that unless anybody's really got anything much to add, again, I've suggested an approach.
Sounds to me like I just need to know more about the windows that are in situ now. You know, what their status is as windows.
Yes, I mean, I can only go off,
What they've
and it's
said.
interesting actually, it's done as a design and access statement, not a heritage impact statement, which arguably they should be.
77 isn't a listed building.
Right, well, that sort of tallies with what we anticipated, but it is in the conservation area.
Is this one listed?
Yes.
But this is listed, so this is an LBC application. Right,
Okay.
right, the consensus is, provided the windows have no intrinsic merit, there's nothing wrong with replacing them. If they're going to be replaced, they might as well be replaced with hardwood. The only question is, arguably, will the conservation officer be satisfied by the windows proposed? Because I find it quite difficult off the drawings to actually try and transpose them onto the building and envisage it in real life. I rather hope he might be more successful at doing that. Anything else on that one? Conservation. I know what you're saying, so can I also do something with that? Right. 3 Benfield Road, the Benfield Court, which is in Single-storey rear extension, changes to fenestration, larger rear terrace and ground floor remodelling of an existing semi-detached three-storey dwelling. What I wrote on my note in relation to that was the application was last considered by us in August last year, when we objected to the application with the objections set out in the agenda in details. I said I was going to repeat it in my note. Strangely, new drawings were posted to the portal in September last year, which I was utterly unaware of until I saw it crop up, as it were, on the agenda for this meeting. So what's been going on between September last year and sort of March? I just don't know what happened in that 6 months. In any event, one of those two drawings is a hand-drawn diagram to indicate, and I put it in quotes, compliance with the 45-degree rule. The other new amended elevations plan. And because I was unfamiliar with what the 45-degree rule was, I looked into it and set it out in the note. As far as anybody can understand it, the 45-degree rule provides that in normal circumstances, no development should intrude over a line drawn at an angle of 45 degrees in the horizontal plane from the midpoint of the nearest window of a habitable room. My instant response to that, and I'll come back to the rest of it in a minute, is I suspect that we do not feel technically competent to take a view. So that our response would probably say that as long as the planners are satisfied that, if you like, what is proposed doesn't breach the 45-degree rule, we'll be satisfied if they think it does, or clearly it'll lead in a different direction. But the main thing is the windows. Right, this come forward. That window, and that window. And it appears that essentially what is proposed is that the windows, which were formerly just ordinary see-through windows, now become obscured glazing. Now, it may be significant or it may not. That one's kind of shaded grey, they're kind of shaded grey. The bottom one seems shaded grey. I'm not so sure about the top two. But I'm assuming, because of the way it's done, that all of those three would become obscured windows. And so far as I could tell, if I remember correctly, there was nothing else I put in my note. Now, if you look back on your agenda to what we said in August, we said the council has considered the changes made by this application to the previous application, which was in 21, which was refused. It doesn't believe that the changes make the application acceptable and therefore object to the present application. And then we set out what we didn't like about it. The window issue is not covered at all in our original objection and hasn't been addressed by the new plan. So, logically, I would say that we simply repeat our previous objection, making the point that obscuring those windows in no way actually deals with the points that we were originally concerned about. Unless anybody's got any other thoughts.
Do we know why they want to obscure them?
No, I don't
I
think.
can't think of a reason why
I don't think I could work it out
not to
entirely.
do it.
Can you? Is there a sort of a? I don't know.
Is there
I
any-
can't remember. Is there a location plan there or something that might, or a site plan that might help us figure out whether there was any kind of an overlooking issue? That doesn't help us greatly, does it, as a site plan? What else is there? I can't remember.
Elevation existing.
I can't remember those side windows, I think anything to do with. what
No,
we were
I don't
interested in as well.
You see, that's as is.
Yeah.
I seem to remember being more worried about the rear and the front.
Well,
Yeah.
we were worried, exactly so.
I remember.
We were worried about both the frontage
to
to Bennefield Road for various reasons, as set out,
Yeah.
and we were worried about the view from,
Yeah.
in effect,
Stoke Road.
across from Stonemoor Road and the fields that lie between it and so on, and didn't feel that what was proposed was in any way satisfactory. As I say, nothing up here addresses it. And I don't think there is anything on the application to give us anything, because if you look, that's the point at which we were looking at it in August. Those two things have gone on in September. As I say, I've no idea why 6 months later we're now looking at it, but there's no other information to explain to us the rationale behind doing what they're doing. But since it doesn't seem to meet any of our previous objections, it seems logical to simply repeat them and make that point, that this doesn't meet our previous objections.
Strange, yeah, it's strange, isn't it?
I just wonder whether they're going to build something alongside it, or
I can give you no guidance other than that I've done, Ruth.
unless they all three become bathrooms.
That seems inherently improbable. Yes, I mean, I dare say that in our response to that specific point, we can say that there isn't actually any clear guidance as to why. But if the permission were to be granted, I can't see why the planners would object to it being obscured glass rather than clear glass. I can see how they might object the other way around potentially. So to some extent, it kind of matters not, because if they grant permission, it'll now have the obscured glass. And if they don't grant permission, that's for the reasons that we said, then it won't matter whether it provided for obscured glass or otherwise. It's a bit of a, I mean, it seems to me like a complete red herring, but there you go. Have you got any ideas? Comments? In which case, we'll reiterate the objections as before. And on the basis that I seem to be writing out most of these, I'll just give you a little something as well. No doubt about that. The next one is probably easier, particularly for those of you who were present last month. Because last month, we dealt with 2 Victoria Yard, which had been damaged in a fire. And I can see from the minutes that you didn't object to what was being proposed. In your terms, these are utterly parallel applications because they arise out of the same set of facts, and some of the paperwork literally is transposed between the two.
Is this a typo? It says road on here.
So,
I couldn't think of a fire that would have been.
sorry, it is indeed, it's my mistake, it should say Victoria Yard. Thanks for spotting that, I hadn't noticed. I would have changed it, yes. My note is wrong, it should say 3 Victoria Yard. As I say, on the basis that we didn't object to the other one, there doesn't seem to be any logical reason to object to this. So unless anybody's got a convincing reason why we should take a different view, I think this one is a straightforward no objection.
I think I'd agree.
Right. We're moving towards the last one. A tree. In fact, I think, strictly speaking, 2 trees. 30 West Street, a weeping willow and a holly. On the weeping willow, a lateral reduction, basically to get rid of branches that sit on the garage roof of the property or on the neighbour's garage roof, or would be likely to do so if something wasn't done about it. And the second is to have a crown reduction on the holly tree to reduce its exposure to wind. The rationale being that it might be vulnerable to being pushed over or damaged, and it's right up against a wall, so if that tree goes, it'll take the wall onto the wall with it. Holly trees, I wouldn't have thought have any immediate huge trees, but in terms of intrinsic merit, it's not like an elm or something where we might get very, very exercised if we attempt to remove one. Weeping willow, again, they're not uncommon. Looks to me like you could argue they're essentially tree husbandry works, where our normal response would be not to object to what's being proposed. If the tree officer gets exercised about it, doubtless he will tell me.
Yeah, we
Council accordingly. So I'd be inclined to simply say no objection to that. Yeah. Which brings us to 58 Lapthorne Road. This is one of those ones where it will help us, I think, to see both the existing plan and the proposed plan. So I'm just going to move myself over towards the screen. If we can bring up the existing floor plan. Right, turn it around and we get that. So, at first floor level, that used to be a garage. As you can see, there is now no entrance to the garage at the front, indeed there's a small wall there. The entrance is at the back and it's used as a store, and this area seems to have a wall and some sort of covering over the top of it. Sitting room, living room, a sort of conservatory stroke lean-to, kitchen, WC. And down here is a garage. If you put up what is proposed, at the moment I'm only looking at the ground floor, and you twiddle the thing around again. So the store disappears. The former garage stroke former store becomes this sort of two-part study. This area is kind of made more substantial and so becomes a living room and a sort of through sunroom bit linking to the kitchen. All of WC as before, and now we have a garage down here with the entrance here. And if you go that way a bit, so we can just see what it says, you can move it, there we go. So 6,000 by 5,600. The applicant says, look, there's enough space to park 2 cars side by side off the road here, and you can have a 3rd car in the garage. If you look at the upstairs plan just for a moment, this is all new and is a bedroom erected over what now becomes the study, but was the former garage stroke store. And over here, over the garage, we have a new master bedroom with an ensuite. The practical effect, of course, is that we go from having 2-bedroom property to a 4-bedroom property. In terms of the detail, it all sounds and looks very nice. I suspect, or I should have said, if you look at that study, there are no windows on what I'm going to call the very top wall, if you look at it. That's pretty close to the adjoining boundary, which is number 60. But there are no windows, so there's no overlooking sideways issues at all. If you like, any windows and doors are front and back.
It's the same with the master bedroom and the bedroom as well on the second floor.
Yes, again, it goes front to back, there's nothing on the side, although it's fair to say that that is further away from the other properties. There's a site plan and you can see what I mean, if you look at it. If there were to be any issue at all, it is that you've got a 2-bedroom property that becomes a 4-bedroom property, and you've got spaces for 2 vehicles off-road, one in a garage, which I think the usual highway standard is you forget the garage space. Therefore, is 2 spaces on the piece of land indicated sufficient for a 4-bedroom property? That might be the only real issue. Now, at the time I looked at the application, there was nothing on there from highways. I don't know whether there is now. It might just be worth.
No, it's not.
Thank you.
It only came in today though. It literally came, I put it on the agenda because I'd seen it on the portal with paperwork, so it's just been validated.
So it may well be that highways haven't had an opportunity, as it were, to pick it up and respond to it. I think that they will, and they're either going to say they're happy, or they're going to say, having but it doesn't kind of comply with our standards in terms of the amount of parking available. Though the reality of it is that with 2 parking spaces and a garage, I don't see it displacing vehicles onto the road on a regular basis. Visitors, I suppose if there were 3 cars for the household, which is perhaps a bit of a presumption in the first place, then a visitor might have to park in the road. But you could replicate that in any property anywhere in town. So the short answer is that looking at that application, there was nothing about it that I saw that made me go, I like that.
The only thing, just looking at the Google Maps image of that property, that essentially becomes, I mean, it's essentially another house. It is a massive property.
It's much more, yes, it's a much more substantial property, obviously. It adds 2 bedrooms, it adds the study, in effect, to the living accommodation. And the old garage seems to just effectively disappears.
Yeah, that's true. There is, what number is that? 60. Just looking at it, there seems to be, there is a light into, I'll probably have to see it on there, number 60.
I think there's probably a location plan, if I remember rightly. I think that shows where this sits relative to number 60.
That's 60 there.
Is it before the door, before after the door?
It's just after, but not by much.
Yeah,
It's looking at the George Car Park entrance.
yeah.
It's just, basically, we're looking at the Google Maps one, and basically there's a window in here.
Yeah.
And of course, that currently looks out, because that's going to become double story at the moment, that's single story. So it's creating a wall that's quite close to that window.
Albeit that the current store at first floor level would appear to be, in fact, closer. But I agree, it's now a 2-story.
Well, I mean, I know this hasn't got anything to, just, I don't know when you can't approve something because of this, but I think the scale of this proposed property is something to take into consideration.
Well, one is entitled to raise the issue of overdevelopment if you think you're putting an elephant on a pig, to use an expression. It is a basis for objection. I mean, it struck me that although it utilises the land available,
Yeah.
that's a fair way of putting it. You know, it's not like there's no land, for example, behind it. It's not.
It's been worse in that road in terms
Yes,
of.
probably has.
I mean, you could quite easily build another house of a similar size next to it or in that. But hey, look, I mean, from our point of view, no objection, it's just, yeah, that's
It's
quite,
an observation.
exactly.
Well, does anybody actually object to it?
No,
I don't know either, so I think we'll just make it nice and simple. We'll call that a no objection as well. If highways do raise an issue, they raise an issue, but I don't know. That's about the car parking. I frequently do, but I'm not convinced that
well,
this
it's
is
not
the
as if the overbuilding, as it were, is displacing anything more onto the road.
Yeah.
Because they're making provision for parking within the footprint anyway. And that's quite often our objection, isn't it? If it's
well, that takes us through the applications. In terms of outcomes, you'll notice that whilst we were a little exercised by what was proposed at Unit 3, the wharf, that's been granted. Interestingly enough, we objected to the felling of the tree unless the tree officer felt there really was no alternative, and that one has been refused. So, looks like we've probably got it right. Excuse me. That takes us off that. There was another document which you all got a copy of. I think it was about 110 pages long. And it's the East Northants Local Plan Part 2 Proposed Modification Consultation. A response is due, I can't remember the exact date, but it is after this month's full council meeting, but it is before we meet again. Now, the reality is that I simply haven't had an opportunity to go through that and put anything particularly before you. I did manage to spend a little time sort of skimming through it and trying to find where it was talking about Hamden, because of course the vast majority of it isn't. And there are clearly some points. It struck me that perhaps, unless others have been able to do a far better job on it than thus far have I, that perhaps the answer is that this committee recommends that this goes on the agenda for the full council meeting, and that I try and put forward some sort of a document for council so that people can take a view. I mean, it's a long old document. It's one of two actually. There is a second one that's I think about 17 pages long, if I remember rightly, which I've also looked at. But there's a lot of work in that, and to some extent one might think it's all going to ultimately be largely academic, because if you think about what the local plan part 2 said, it said, let's allocate the sites at Ashton Road, off St Christopher's Drive, at Cotterstock Road, off it and St Peter's Road, and off Stoke Doyle Road by the cemetery. Of those, 2 have already got full planning permission. Work is extremely well underway on the Cotterstock Road side. It looks as if there might be a delay to the development of the St Christopher's Drive site from what I saw the other day. It almost looks like Persimmon land banking it rather than developing it at this moment for some reason. It seems slightly odd in the circumstances, but there you go. Planning permissions usually have that clause in it that says the development must start within X period of the grant. And of course, all they've really got to do is put a spade in the ground practically, and that qualifies them. I don't think they're going to just let the permission lapse. So I'm sure something will happen, it's just a watch this space job. Stoke Doyle Road, I have absolutely no idea where we are with that. It was a while ago that we commented on the last iteration of plans, and I haven't seen an outcome as yet. I can only surmise that therefore there are probably debates going on between NAC planning and the applicant to try to come up with something that the planning authority are happy with. But when you therefore put the local plan part 2 in context,
Well, what are we going to do?
it's not a case of saying, oh, this is rubbish because and you shouldn't be developing these sites because 2 out of 3 are there anyway. I suppose that one could input the objections that we have made to the various plan iterations so far as Stoke Doyle Road is concerned, and simply make that as a response, partial response to the consultation, to say that, you know, although allocated, we have had reservations about the applications thus far brought forward, and here are the various objections that we've made, and that seems fairly logical. Of course, the thing isn't only about residential development. The local plan part 2 is about absolutely everything under the sun. And I haven't had a lot of time to look at other aspects of the plan so far as it may relate to Amble. But to be fair, our main concerns about the local plan part 2 were about the residential side of it and not anything else. Pretty much it's a bit of a simplification. So in terms of putting something before full council, I don't think it will necessarily be that complicated. And if you're with me on that, that's what we can do. And if anybody has any sort of observations on it, between now and then, they can always email those through to me so I can consider those and maybe factor them into anything I might put together, assuming I can. Unless, of course, anybody has things that they're very keen to discuss now, in which case I would not wish to stifle debate. I don't see anybody in the rush at this moment to say anything.
With respect, you're the one that knows all these things, because you've been through them time and time and time again.
Yeah, thinking about it.
And
Fair
I
enough.
think what you've said is absolutely bang on.
Okay, I will try and put something together. Lisa, if you can tell them to put it on the full council agenda. It probably means that unfortunately in the full council pack, people are going to need to have a copy of this. And certainly don't send it to members of the planning committee because it just get confusing, so you're all going to see it again.
Yeah, it's right for the whole council to own it, you know.
It is.
I think also, could you add what our objections have been so far, maybe for councillors that weren't here or, you know.
Yes, I'm just trying to think.
Well, some
There
of it
was-
you've just done is pretty nice.
Yeah.
Actually.
I mean, we must have produced, well, I know I did produce, I don't know, somewhere in my filing system, I've probably got it, but
I've got them all.
you
I've got
probably
the
got
final
it
reply,
to
so.
hand. Email it to me.
On all the sites, all the ones we've objected, yeah, the final.
No, not so much that. The objections for Stoke Door Road, but what I was thinking about is our original comments in relation to the local plan part 2.
Alright.
Only so that we can
Yeah.
sort of compare those as against what it is now proposed to look like. Because what you've got to remember is that the document that we're now seeing is I was going to say East Northampton. It's the East Northampton plan as now pushed forward by North Northampton. That has been modified in the light of what took place before the inspector. Inspectors have a wonderful way of saying, express this differently. And you say exactly the same thing in a slightly different way, and the inspectors have it. And there might well be elements of that in here, but there will be masses of bits of detail. But if you've got this council's original comments
Okay.
in relation to the original consultation, and that it might be worth emailing it to me, just so I can refresh my memory about that to a degree. But I don't propose, unless something extraordinary happens, that what I'm going to draft is going to be a sort of 50-page document or even a 20-page document. It's much more likely to be a 2-page document. A, because I don't think I'll have the time to do anything much more anyway. And B, because I don't think there will be that much ultimately that we will necessarily want to feed back into what is a further part of a endless consultation process.
There might be the odd thing where something good's happened,
Absolutely, and maybe that,
which would prove that
we
it's worth fighting.
highlighted.
Fighting.
Of course, what we must also have in the back of our minds is that NNC have already started the process to replace the local plan part 2. And we fed into that initially, and I think we're now waiting to see, to the next stage of that process, where the NNC produce something that hopefully takes into account the various representations that were made to it. I forgot what they called it, but anyway, we did. Unless there's anything further on the local plan part 2, the only other thing on the agenda is any other relevant matters for the report. Councillor Chesser,
No, I don't know.
you,
None for me.
Councillor Jones, Councillor Arnold?
Only thing, and I know it's not actually relevant, are we aware that the clock, annual town council clock on the old town hall tells the wrong time?
It doesn't tell the right time.
No, it doesn't tell the right time, it tells the wrong time.
Is it an hour out?
No, it's weirdly out. It's like quite a few hours out.
I've not long had that repaired.
Oh, okay.
Might have had
I was looking out my window the other day, I can see it.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not right.
Do they both tell the same time each end?
No,
Or
so
they different to each
the
other?
one that's not the town council, so is that the Rotary Club?
They're both ours,
Okay, one end, the one near the bus stop tells the right time.
right?
The
But
other
the one above
side
Sean Quinny doesn't.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, perhaps you could, well, I don't know whether that falls to you or whatever, but
No,
yeah,
it's-
somebody,
Yeah, I know, it's not.
somebody could look into it.
Well, no.
It's not strictly plain, that's
No.
so fair enough to raise it. Councillor Sherwood. I think it's probably nothing from me, so I think it's a sort of, and good night from him. So I call the meeting closed at 20 to 9, slightly better than I thought it was going to be.